All right. Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, James.
So we're continuing this series on the family series, but also we feel like we're going to title this Leading from the Home. Previously, we had talked to Sophie Molinaro, and she was talking about how sports has been an important part of her life at a young age and how leadership helps her kind of develop, maybe it's transitive, not just in sports, but also at home. Talked a little bit with Ryan about what his parenting thoughts were, but in any family, there's two parents. There's two. It takes two. It's not just one. And so we thought it'd be important to just talk to Ryan's wife, Lauren. So we have Lauren as well on the podcast. And so maybe Lauren, you can give a quick introduction to yourself and where you're from and your background.
Sure. My name's Lauren. I met Ryan, 15 years ago, maybe?
Roughly.
We've been married for 10 years, and my background has always been working with kids and in education. So while I was at Cal State Long Beach getting my degree, I worked for a regional center-funded program for infants and toddlers, 18 months to 3-year-olds with disabilities. So I did in-home therapy, and I was one of the lead teachers at a clinic there that did group therapy for kiddos all over the spectrum. Mm-hmm. So I got my start in early ed and loved it. And so I went and got my multiple subjects teaching credential, which is a teaching credential for K through 8th. And then I went and got my master's and second credential in early childhood special education. And from there, I went on to work at a private school in Palos Verdes called Chadwick. I was a learning specialist there for 10 years. And I have done educational therapy since, and now I am director of student support services at a school here down in San Diego.
Wow. As you can hear, extensive education experience, specifically in child development and specialized in disability. So obviously, very good pedigree. You might think the perfect parent to raise a child. So
you're perfect.
And then, Ryan, last time we talked on the podcast, we never actually got your background. Maybe you can give a quick introduction about your background.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of lived all over the country. If I really go back, East Coast, spent college years in the Midwest. Loved that. That was a really neat experience to come from kind of the East Coast grind to the Midwest care. Mm-hmm. Then made my way west to California. Felt the call always to come this way. So had an opportunity, took it, led into a role in management right away out of college, took jobs no one else wanted and did things like working weekends and long hours all through my 20s and really started to work my way up in the management world. Started asking myself a question about, I guess it's 14 years ago now. I said, what am I good at? And I knew I was good at people. I knew I was good at lifting other people up. I knew I was good at developing people, and not only good at it, but that's what I loved. Okay. So I loved bringing people to be their best. Okay. Helping them excel. And I've been in management since at various levels to executive management. And now it's on the consulting side and helping others do it well in their world.
Yeah, and a quick question. Anything in your education, in your degrees that you thought would help with that? Or what was your degree? Did you mention that?
No, I didn't. Degree was business. Mm-hmm. It was finance.
Okay.
So certainly I enjoyed the psychology classes. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed law classes. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed the extracurricular classes as well. They're always fun. And really it came down to I enjoyed the classes that was the most interactive and where I was engaging with others.
So no necessarily formal education, but all lived experiences in terms of relationship and people management and the jobs that you've taken.
Yeah, I mean, it was relationship, people management, and then it really became a journey that I started going down. So then it was self-improvement books. Started there. Mm-hmm. Right away, I read a book, and I said, wow, there's some stuff I do. There's some other stuff I don't do. And I started this path of self-discovery and then starting to experiment and try things on, and started getting in a lot of conversations. And shortly thereafter, I'd say 2 years after I started that journey, I started working with Garrett, and then we kind of naturally gravitated towards one another and found that we're a good pair.
Right.
And from there, I've just gone deeper and deeper into content and learning on my own. And
You also have a wife and kids that make you.
So he's forced to learn also.
that's where you
with
start getting real practical on,
What do you get?
On how, how's my behavior at home.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that then, I mean, not to interrupt you, but I want to also just quickly get people caught up. Like, you moved to California. How long before you guys met? And then how long did you date and then get married? And then how long did you have before you decided to have children?
Well, we met roughly, like Lauren said, 15 years ago. We didn't start dating until a few years after we met. We met through friends. It was kind of a neat story. And
Yeah, we met through one of my coworkers, lived in the same complex as Ryan. And I had moved from Manhattan Beach back to Long Beach. And so she invited me out to dinner. I tagged along, and it was supposed to be her and her boyfriend. And this guy shows up with his, at that time, girlfriend.
Yeah.
So
Oh, wow.
I was a fifth wheel on a double date. That was fun.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what? I guess now I'm interested, like, what happened there?
We were friends for 3 years, maybe.
Yeah, roughly.
2 or 3 years. And we both were part of a larger group of friends and enjoyed hanging out. And we went on some trips together and, just hung out.
Yeah. I'd say our turning point was we went on a trip. We connected quite a bit. And we were going on these long walks as the group. We were in the mountains of Big Bear, and we just found ourselves walking and just kind of floating through the town, went to a hat store, trying on stuff, like just really having fun. The whole weekend was, I would say, really joy-filled. Every person that was there. And
go ahead.
And from there, it was like, hey, for me, I was like, I want to see her again. Absolutely, like soon. And she seemed to agree.
She seemed to agree. Well,
she was still figuring me out. And that Wednesday, we went out and we went for a long walk. And on that walk, we both remember it. I know I remember it vividly. We know exactly where we were. And I was like, I would like to spend the rest of my life with this lady.
What was it about her? If you could name something that you felt like this was it, something.
It was,
I would say, just the quality and depth of conversation we could have.
Okay.
I think up to that point we were 30 at the time. So
yeah.
it was, our 20s of just friendships and having fun and going out and partying, doing whatever 20-year-olds do. But then when we connected, we were able to right away, go deep in conversation and connected on foundational levels of just what we wanted out of life and our future. And we were able to talk about it, and he's able to talk about those things, which a lot of men aren't able to do. So I think just our conversations.
Hadn't met me yet.
Yeah, there was maybe a self-awareness perhaps that.
Yeah, I think we both knew who we were as individuals,
Right.
and we both already knew each other on a friend level. And so once we did decide to date and connect, there wasn't much time to figure things out. We already kind of knew that this was the path we were headed.
Nice. And then how long were you guys married before you guys decided to have Sophie and children?
That was January. We went on a date. I bought a ring in March, April.
Okay.
I think I ordered it in April. And then we got engaged
In
November that year on my birthday. She had no idea it was coming.
And then we got married 6 months later and thought that it would take a while to have kids, but Sophie came less than a year later. So
Right. Okay. So it was immediately
Immediate,
after.
yeah.
Meeting.
Yeah.
we
Okay.
kind of jumped right into buying a house, having a baby,
Yeah. Wow.
renovating.
Wow.
We did
We
all
were-
the things they tell you not to do.
Yeah, we were moving in the day she went into labor.
Yeah, Ryan was in the storage
Wow.
unit, and I called him and said, "It's time." And
Wow.
his response was, "Are you sure?"
That's not her favorite response from me.
Yeah. Are
Granted,
you sure?
granted, we had gone a few times earlier,
Mhm.
and they call it false labor. And
Okay, I see.
we both looked at each other and laughed. Yeah.
So then how did you guys prepare for having a child then? Did you guys read up on it? You had the education? Was there things that you did? How did you prepare for
She knew
this?
a lot more than me.
I felt very comfortable with the idea of having kids,
Mhm.
raising kids. I'm very comfortable around babies. My mom is one of 8. I have 32, I think, cousins on her side. On my dad's side, I have a plethora of cousins too. So I was raised amongst kids and
Yeah.
babysitting. I started babysitting at 10, I think.
So there was no trepidation.
There was no like worry or like learning curve in terms of what to do with a baby, how to change diapers, and that kind of stuff was very familiar to me. And then just the idea of family has something I've dreamt for my entire life. So that wasn't a concern of mine.
Okay. How about yourself, Ryan?
I knew I wanted to have children. Had zero idea what that entailed. I think the first infant I held was my daughter.
Wow.
And I had to learn a lot.
So you learned on the fly, and when you had
Yeah, I tend to build the parachute on the way down.
That's true.
Yeah, so I guess I imagine with your extensive background and education, with Ryan coming in kind of blind, how did that relationship work in terms of opinions and raising a child?
Well, he says that he's, figuring things out as he goes, but what he's not saying is he is very well researched and versed in other areas. So I may handle a lot of like developmentally what's happening or discipline or parenting styles or, which direction we're headed with that. But in terms of health and nutrition and what we're feeding and doing for our kids from a health standpoint is 100% Ryan. So I would say, he took the lead on literally making from, scratch all of our baby food and,
Wow.
nut milks when the babies were a year old. So he definitely, we defaulted to what we knew and what was comfortable. And we were able to release control in those areas and defer to the other person.
How soon were you guys able to quickly determine whose areas of responsibility was what? Like, was that something you guys actively discussed, or was it just a natural, like, hey, Ryan's a nutrition guy, he has the extensive knowledge in dieting, discipline, maybe yours, what?
I think it kind of organically unfolded as the kids grew older and the needs became apparent. I think there was definitely a learning curve the first, 6 months when they're the newborn stage where, it's hard not as a mom to get resentful that you're the only one getting up in the middle of the night and feeding. And, the sharing of responsibility when they're so young is tough. And there was some
She'd make sure I
growing
woke up too.
pains.
She made sure you woke up and she
Well,
did.
he would wake up in the morning and be like, wow, they did great. I'm like, I was up 9 times last night.
I slept great. I didn't.
I'm assuming, Ryan, you're a deep sleeper then. You can sleep through anything.
Typically.
Yeah,
Typically.
And then I guess then the question then is, how was there any conflict besides the waking up night where you guys had disagreements on how to raise a child? What are some of the things that, you guys maybe had different opinion, or were you guys always in total alignment with what we should do?
I would say for the big picture things, we're pretty much aligned on most things. There was maybe a few, 1 or 2, and it wasn't even disagreements, but like, okay, we need to talk about this a little bit further. Like a conversation needs to be had. It's not just like you make the decision and I'm behind you. But for the most part, I would say I maybe wouldn't always say we loved it, but like in terms of his passion for making food and everything needs to be sourced from proper sourcing to what they're eating and how they're eating. It matters. But for me, like that could be a source of frustration on days where like you just need to be convenience too.
Right.
As a mom. So there's moments of tension with he may want this to look a certain way for like health and quality of food, which I wholeheartedly agree. But also I'm the one at home who's being forced to do all this
Because
while
he's
you're at
working,
work.
right.
And so the load and the work level, it's easy for someone to say that, but then to actually live that out is a different story. So there's moments of tension with that, but it wasn't because I didn't agree with him or wasn't on board with it. It was just the practicality of playing that out is a little bit harder than.
And
easier said than done.
when you had Sophie, and you weren't working at that time, you were fully dedicated.
I was. So after I had Sophie, I was home for I think 5 months, and then I went back to work. I went back part-time, but as any part-time mom knows, you get paid part-time, but you're working full-time.
Right.
The hours still was a lot. So I went back part-time until I had Camille, and then I did consulting stuff on the side once Camille was born.
Okay. And I'm surprised, you're talking about nutrition and health. Is that something they didn't teach you in school? I was thinking in school they would teach you like the whole person. So what would they teach you in education in school? Give me some examples of what they're teaching you.
I mean, it's more having to do with the learning environment and accessing curriculum and making sure that every child with even different learning styles and different needs, those needs are addressed in a classroom setting. But as so far to say like outside or home life, it's not really addressed. Although I learned, I think there's a very big difference from being in a classroom and learning theory of something to walking it out practically in real life.
Right.
So things like I learned about autism and different disabilities per se, but then when I was working with the regional center program, I was working hand in hand with families, and so when they're talking about you learn about ABA, behavior therapy, and adaptations and modifications and accommodations in a classroom to support these kids, but what they are not teaching you is all the backstory that the families are going through. And so part of it is nutrition. So a lot of families tried a gluten casein-free diet, which worked wonders. So these are things that they're not always
So you learned
about.
that at school versus something that
I think it's just I've learned that there's always more to the story and that it's not a simple step program to getting results, that there's all these different facets of each of these kids' lives, and their home life plays into it 100%. And so you have to build relationships with not only the kids but the families and learn what's going on and how to support them.
So how are the things that you took in the education side, maybe aside from the nutrition that they didn't teach, what things did they teach you in the education that you found readily applicable to your own home or possibly in the school? Maybe both. Ask maybe the differences between the two.
So, sorry, the question was, what did I learn?
What learn in the education in school that you felt like it readily applied to your work? And then did that also apply at home, or would you treat them differently?
Yes, I think sometimes more information isn't always better. So I knew a lot about developmental milestones and what, expectations you should be seeing at different stages of development. And so sometimes when you know too much, you start to freak out over all these little things.
So there's a little anxiousness because you knew what they're supposed to be
sure,
developing.
Sure. When you know what should be coming in, if it doesn't come on time or whatever, that can be nerve-wracking. But I think that was helpful too, to just kind of the way I work is I like to think ahead and planning what's next and seeing what's coming down, the path for us, and preparing for those things. So a lot of the developmental milestones were huge in terms of preparation for family life, like transitioning from a crib or potty training, or just the normal transitions that every parent has to go through was helpful to kind of have a bigger picture of what that looks like.
Did you find the same techniques or ideas that you applied at work also applied at home, or what things did you feel like was totally different that maybe you did at work but you would never use at home?
I think in terms of work and home, what doesn't apply is I have been an educational therapist and tutor for years too. So when I work with kids, I have a system of how I help with executive functioning and organization and time management and homework support. And then when doing that with my own children, they're not necessarily wanting to hear that from mom. So there's a different role and different hat that you wear as a parent that they're not always, when a kid comes in the classroom and a teacher says something, it's it's gold. It's that is law.
Right.
But if mom says the same thing,
It's not the same.
It's white noise. So I think working with my older daughter on a homework problem or something, and I would explain it, and she's like, "Mom, you don't know what you're talking about." I'm like, "Well,
wow,
I do."
Well, she kind of does.
Wow.
So there's that parenting role that just it's not received the same way. Like if I were to work with another student, I think it's different.
Yeah, the role is different because you're a mom. So,
Right.
So then how do you work around that being a mom, but with all your extensive background? Like, how do you then apply that and also get to what you want her to do when you know she needs to do that? Like, is there a method to that, or do you have to adjust?
I think it's a case by case as situations come up. So like for homework, it's figuring out what the goal is, setting goals, and helping her have power and decision in making those things happen. Like for us, homework was an issue. She didn't want to come home every day after school and do homework because our rule is you can't do any after school activities or turn on the TV or go on a play date until homework's done. And so that was just our boundary that we created. And so we worked together talking about like, well, how do we make this work for you? And so giving her some choices and some control on that. And she decided on her own, she set her alarm for 4:45 or 5 a.m.?
She was up a few mornings at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she decided it'd be better for her to wake up early and do her homework before school so that when she gets home, she can do what she wants.
So
that was a compromise that we said, fine, if that's what you're going to do, I
She does it.
Interesting.
commend you for that. And she did it the entire school year.
Wow. So you gave her flexibility to make her own decisions.
Yeah, I think giving them choices so they feel they have some say and control really empowers them because, I mean, what parent doesn't want their kid to...
And it's more in a request form, right?
It's a request, and it's not this demand that's going to create rebellion from your kids. It's this is something we have to do. Let's partner together. Let's compromise. How do we get this done that works for both of us?
So you actually presented like, hey, this is what we need to do.
Yeah,
like
that this is the requirement. This isn't something I'm creating out of the blue.
Right.
I would like before TV comes on or a play date or something, this to be done. So beyond that, that's my only boundary. And so we kind of brainstormed some ideas, and she gets up early anyways. And so she always asked if she could watch a show. And we would say, no, it's a school day. And so it kind of was a natural way for her to use that time wisely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which I think is teaching her a lifelong skill.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dad's proud.
Yeah.
You were proud.
Oh, yeah. I'm proud of her. Well,
Tell
because
us
I get
more.
up early, and I've found that there's just that gold in the early rise. And
You win the day.
yeah, win the day, win the morning, and then your day is completely different than as if you get up late and then you're just behind.
Sure.
You can't make your bed and all these other there's all these little things that you can do in the morning to set yourself up for a good day.
And this is where parenting comes in because Camille, our other daughter,
Oh yeah.
it's night and day different.
Okay.
We're
She's
literally dragging her out of bed when it's time to go to school. So that
Okay.
will not work for her. So we have to come up with a different solution. So each kid's different. Their hearts are different. Their styles of learning are different. Like
Right.
literally our parenting has to change for each
child,
child.
right? So, and so with Sophie's case, she came up with her own, decision process how to make the work for the objective, and that was successful for her. But let's hypothetically say it didn't work for her. She said, "I want to wake up early," but she's still not getting the homework done in time. What would you do in these cases then, where you should probably have an idea what's best?
Well, I think if it's that the homework's too hard and she's challenged with the homework, there would be a different solution than if she's bored or whatever that may be. But one solution might be, okay, what do you think would be a reasonable amount of time to sit down and do homework for her? She may say 10 minutes. Okay, let's set a timer for 10 minutes. You're going to do work. And then when the timer goes off, we'll go get a snack, take a break, and set another timer. So it depends on what the source, what the root of the problem is. If it's a attention span, she can't literally sit for that long, then we'll break it up in chunks. If it's the work's too hard, then maybe we need some support and homework.
Yeah.
So I think it depends the function of the behavior of what we're seeing and addressing it from that standpoint.
Interesting. Well, and let me ask you, Ryan, because being a manager, what things do you find at the workplace that also applies to at home? What did you find that you learned in the workplace that seemed similar that you could apply, or maybe it was things that did not? Of course, as a family, there's blood, but
Yeah. Well,
what applied?
there's a different response, and I'm extremely thoughtful on wanting to. I have the desire to know their heart. I've found actually diving into that is more applicable in the workplace.
So you're saying what you learned at home in terms of understanding your daughter's heart.
Yeah, knowing who she is.
Yeah.
Which comes into one of the most important rules that we teach is knowing your people.
So you learned something at home that then you took it back to work and said that's something that worked at home from leading at home, and you applied it to the workplace.
And I think there's another piece that Ryan does really well is not only does he know like his daughters and people he works with, but he speaks into them. Like he validates them and encourages and takes the time to speak into those things that he knows that they've been working hard. We as a family address the idea of we don't care about grades or the product of things. We care about the process. And we don't care if you get an A, but if you studied really hard and worked hard, then that's celebrated. So it's about the effort and the hard work, not about what comes of it.
Right.
And so Ryan does a really good job of just speaking into that. And like you can see, like he'll say, wow, Sophie, that you worked so hard. I'm so proud of you. And like her eyes are just lighting up and sparkling. It's really cute. So I think he does a good job of knowing who they are, but also speaking into it.
Well, and then that brings us to maybe a conflict though, because, you know, I can see like, let's say she's working really hard, but she's still getting a D, you know, and there is a results-oriented process that a lot of parents have to think about. And then also in the workplace, you know, if you're trying to take that and speak into people, but they're still not producing, how do you handle then in a world that values performance, values results? How do you handle that as a development child and also in the workplace?
I'll let Lauren go first.
Okay.
I think that you need to stay true to the effort because the effort will produce better results. So as long as you agree that what is the goal of this? Is it the goal to get the A? Because I don't think many parents really, you know, at least at the ages our kids are at, a grade doesn't really matter. It's creating foundational skills and habits that will sustain the lifetime. And so I feel like the more you associate hard work to be intrinsically motivating for them to do it, if you are just focusing on the product, the A, that creates an intrinsic motivation. Like I only feel motivated if I get the A.
Right.
What happens when you don't?
Right.
So you really want to enforce the intrinsically motivated child to do well. And I think part of that is, we talk about it too, is I follow this gal and she's been great, but she talks about ignore the junk. So only don't water the weeds.
Okay.
Meaning so behaviors you see that you're not really wanting to promote in your kids, or if they're whining or crying or, you know, being kids, you're kind of choosing to look for the good instead of like the phrase that she uses is don't water the weeds. So if you're seeing behaviors you're not loving, don't give them attention.
Don't give it attention. Okay.
Don't address it. You want to just ignore it and instead find something that they're doing that's good.
Focus on that.
Focus on that because kids are wired to respond to attention, both negative and positive. So if you're feeding the negative behaviors attention, you're actually encouraging that to happen again and again.
That's a good point. Ryan, you were going to say something?
No, I mean, I was going to go after her. I mean, here's the deal. At work, you know when people aren't putting in effort. And if you don't, as the manager or the lead, well, let me just say as having directs, you'll know because somebody's going to say something on the team. They're like, hey, Jim's not doing a whole lot. You have to be careful. Sometimes people don't have good intentions, but then you'll start seeing that too. There's a pattern. So at work, you see these patterns. I've found in my experience that people do want to do a good job. They want to do a good job. It's the manager that shuts them down from being creative, from putting in the effort, from making a decision because, the manager shut them down so hard the last time that they made a decision that didn't have a great outcome. It maybe wasn't detrimental to the business, but it wasn't ideal. It's just safer to not make the decision for the person. So it completely applies. It's the same, you know, the two go hand in hand, home and profession. Is the effort there? Is the care there? Is it going to be
to care internally about their work?
I mean, listen, I can never get someone to care. I can never make them force them to care more than they can hold themselves accountable to care, to put in the effort. I could never. I could get some real short term, let me wave your job in front of you motivation. You're going to, if you don't do this, this is gone. That's short term. And and by the way, everyone around is watching and they see that. And then now you just lost trust with all them.
It's huge. Well, then I guess, back to the, what in a results oriented world where a company needs profit, you're rewarding behavior, but the person's still not doing it. Like, how do you handle that? Like, how do you, developing a child may be different than somebody who's an adult who already has a family and, like say the salesperson who's putting all the effort, but they're not making any sales. Like, as a manager or supervisor, what do you do to hold them accountable? What do you do to motivate them to be able to do that?
I mean, first you have to have the courage to have the conversation. So that's where courage comes in. We run from those conversations because they're really hard. And someone might not like me. And listen, I'm not saying that flippantly. Like, it's a real thing. Someone doesn't want to be unliked as a manager at work. Michael Scott from The Office is the best example of that. He's the extreme example, and it really is. It's The Office, but he didn't want anyone to not like him. So what did he do that whole show? He never made tough decisions. He would pull someone in. Dwight, address this with everyone. Go out there and tell everyone they're fired. Tell everyone they got to do this. He never made that decision. So you have to start somewhere, and you might not be ready to have the full. If you're seeing, you're going to see a pattern. You're going to see a pattern of behavior, and if you see that pattern, first time, second time, third time, okay, now we're seeing something that's not helping the overall goal. So the first thing you do is you align. You align on the overall goal. Hey, this is what we're working towards. Now, mind you, you should already know this person.
I was going to say, it all comes back to know your people, right? And if you already have that relationship and that rapport, it's easier to have that conversation when that time comes of like, hey, I noticed that you're putting in all this effort. We're not seeing the results. And I think that if that relationship and that rapport already exists, you can work with them instead of leveraging something over them. And I think that part of that takes some EQ awareness too, of how to talk to people, how to uncover what the problem is. So if you can't help as a manager figure out what the roadblock is or what is happening, how are they supposed to fix it either?
They're not going to do it perfect out the gates either. It takes practice. It takes effort, back to effort. So you put in the effort to know the person. You put in the effort to help make sure they understand the goal. What are we going to do here? What's the vision, right?
And now you said the hard conversations with your subordinates. Is it the same with your children, having a hard conversation? And how do you do that with your children?
Yeah, I think it's delicate, right? Like you don't want to label or put things on them that aren't them. I think it's still like we try to just ask a lot of questions, a lot of leading questions. Like there was a time where one of our daughters played a sport, soccer, and literally it was painful to watch. She just wasn't interested.
She talked about it already on the podcast.
She talked about it.
I was actually really proud of her. It was really
she
good.
did talk
came
about it.
I was proud
home.
of her.
I didn't hear it yet, but she got in the car, and instead of just being like, Sophie, you need to pay attention. You need to kick the ball. Let's get going. And trying to parent her from a teaching perspective, I would ask the question, how do you think that went?
Right.
Like, what do you think?
Right.
And so asking some questions and trying to lead her to an awareness and understanding is part of our job to help support her and not just cut her down. Right.
So, in the earlier podcast, she did talk about that incident. And so how did you know that this maybe was not the sport for her to continue in? Or how do you encourage her to continue on and finish the goal? Like, how do you find that balance?
Yeah, for us, it's if you start something and commit to it, you see it through.
She said that. You'd be proud of her.
There is no quitting when it comes to something you've committed to initially.
Okay.
There's choice in what they get to commit to. So there is their choice out the gates. Right now, our rule in our family is they can do 2 things at a time. So they get to pick what those 2 things are. But there's a season that once you sign up for it, you got to see it all the way through.
You're talking 2 things in the season in terms of like sports or activity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then with one of your daughters, well, you know, it's Sophie. So when she said she didn't want to do it anymore, and this is early, how did you handle that to continue to motivate her to commit to that? Because I imagine it'd be very hard if she doesn't want to do it. She doesn't want to put the effort in. She's basing it, how was it a team effort, or was it all on Ryan, yourself? How
No,
did
I
you guys
think
work?
as a family, we've told her that we have to see it through. Your teammates are counting on you. This is something we committed to. Next season, you don't have to play soccer again.
Right.
But this is, and to top it all off, she had asked Ryan to be the coach. So
Right,
guess
that's
who's
what I
coaching
said.
the team?
That's
I'm
what
coaching the team.
Right.
A former athlete. I have, hey, we're gonna
Results oriented.
results
you wanna win.
oriented. I'm driven to perform, and I'm like, hey, so imagine the opportunity for me to have to walk through this. Right. It's not how I would have done it. It's maybe not what I want my child to do. So I had to really, I had to step back. I had to look at the whole thing, not get taken out by my emotions, work with Lauren, needed her help.
Okay.
I knew it wouldn't be fruitful to force her.
Okay.
And so I knew some things not to do, which wasn't force her, coach her from the car, and I wasn't gonna be reprimanding her on the field, and but now all along I was still had some firm boundaries on the field. There would be some complaining, and I said, "We're practicing. Everyone's practicing. Can you please go get back in line?"
The game days, everyone has to play. So there were days where she went in for 30 seconds, but
there was a
went in.
30-second game. There was a 30-second game.
Yeah, I think
She was out quickly.
Yeah. I think we talked about this one. So Lauren, you're seeing this, this play out, and Ryan's relying on you. Like maybe you can elaborate. How were you relying on her, and what were you thinking, and how were you thinking of supporting or helping in this situation?
Well, I'm trying to get her buy-in, knowing her strengths and what she cares about. So what she cares about is she's a people person too. So she cares about her friends and being there and not letting them down.
Yeah,
and
knowing her, you knew
being part of a team. What does that mean, and what does that look like? And giving her some power and control. So like since Ryan was a coach, we bought this like water sprayer so she could spray her friends during halftime, or like giving her something that she was excited about to be participating in the game.
And she was excited to be spraying water on her friends.
Right.
She loved
It's
it.
the baby steps, the little things you got to find that gives them some buy-in.
I think that just takes innovation, though, because I don't think people would think that to give a spray bottle, and she was interested. Most people would be like, you need to get on the field.
Yeah.
This is, we got to score, so.
I mean, listen, it comes into we have to be aligned. And it's the same thing in the workplace. You have to be aligned. You got to be aligned with everything. I don't know, if you're in charge, the higher you are up, the more you have to worry about alignment up and down the entire chain.
Yeah.
Right.
And the vision, like, is our vision for Sophie for her to be a star soccer player? No, it's for her to know what hard work is and being part of a team and get that experience and know herself, know that that's not something she's interested in. So once we knew what like our goal and vision was for her, it was like just seeing it through.
Yeah, and so well, we talked about sports with the other episode. How do you see sports in terms of applying to her life, and as a benefit or maybe a negative? Like soccer is one example, but the other examples, like how did you guys make the decision even to start her at 2 years old or 18 months old? Like, what was their thought process between that?
For me, I think being involved in team sports is like a must for kids at some point. And we believe really in giving them exposure to everything and just giving them a well-rounded experience of childhood and not specializing in them in one thing too early and letting them be kids. And I think you learn a lot being part of a team sport and competition. And I think it's something I think culture and society has watered down a ton of, like this era of everyone gets trophies. There's no losers, which is great in terms of building self-esteem, but kids need to know how to get feedback and how to receive criticism and how to
Lose gracefully.
And being a good sport and cheering on the team even when you're not doing well. And that's a hard thing for kids to learn.
Because the losing is actually an opportunity as well, because it's, I don't want that feeling again. What's it going to take? Oh, I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to work more. I'm going to have to work harder. I'm going to have to pay attention when my coach is saying something. I'm going to have to pay attention when I'm being taught. So there's opportunity there.
So this idea of sports, was that something that was taught in education or something that you just knew inherently or experienced or read up on to do something like this?
No, I think Ryan was pretty passionate about them playing a team sport. He came from team sports.
Team and individual.
I grew up dancing, so for me, we threw them in gymnastics at 18 months old?
18 months.
And I think that gives them good mind-body coordination type of a foundation to go off of. So I think just involvement in sports and community and friendships and life lessons that are learned in that. And I think we don't necessarily need them to be the best athlete. We want them to be a good person and be able to handle gracefully. But it also plays that beyond sports. I mean, Sophie wasn't always the most gracious loser. She still isn't.
Working on that.
So I started investing in games, board games.
Okay.
And now we're trying to do family game nights where we're not taking it easy, and she has to lose sometimes. It doesn't always go well.
It doesn't always go well.
But I think that's our job to teach her. It's not about, there's this cheesy phrase of winning doesn't matter, but for a 9-year-old or an 8-year-old, it's everything.
Right.
So how do we lose gracefully?
Yeah, it feels like every decision you guys made to put your children in sports or an activity is for a process of learning, not necessarily the results in terms of winning in itself, but a developmental process for them to learn how to handle life.
Right. And I think if a child is a natural, raw talent, that's going to come. I don't think you have to force them into sports to teach them skills of soccer at the age of 3. I think if they're naturally just drawn to that, it's going to come. So I think this age for kids, absolutely. The goal is not necessarily the skill of the sport itself. It's so much more beyond that.
I've been around a lot of high-level athletes my whole life, actually, even from when I was very young. My sister's husband was a professional athlete, so I spent a lot of time with him and his friends and saw that. But every time, if someone's really, really good, if they have the talent, well, one, you got to pair the effort with the talent.
The heart with the talent.
Yep. So so if they have that talent but they don't have the effort, we've all seen the natural talents that don't do anything. That's not a new story. We love the story of the Rudies of the world, right? The just absolute heart for hard work. And so that's where that effort comes in that foundation. And if they have that raw talent and they find their sport, say, hey, we could even get it wrong. I do recommend you want to do a sampling of many sports and you don't want to specialize early.
And that's my next question is, how do you know what's an age-appropriate sport? Determine that 18 months seems a little young for gymnastics, but I know in dance you had her maybe at 8 years, a little bit later.
Dance they started, I think, at 2 or 3.
Okay.
Yeah, 2.5.
Yeah,
but I think it's developmentally appropriate. At 18 months, we weren't throwing her in a gymnastics class and leaving. It was a parent.
Oh, it was a parent gymnastics.
Yeah, it was a parent-led class. So you're there with them the whole time.
There's a few other dads in there.
Yeah, you get the runners, which our child was. So
it's fun.
It's part of them learning how to.
Oh, and guess what you're doing as the parent? You're moving. Right?
So you're helping.
Every Saturday morning, you're also moving.
There's a benefit to
there is. There's a benefit. It gets you doing, you're leaned over, you're having to pick up, you get up, you sit down, you take your shoes off, you're walking around bare feet. There's a really good piece for the parent in that.
Now, I asked Ryan this question, but I didn't ask you, Lauren. We talked about how education and your work experience and if it applied to the home. After being a mother, do you feel like, what did you learn as a mother? Did you feel like it was applicable to the workplace as well, or do you feel like it was basically very similar? Did it change?
Think for the first, I don't even know how long, 5 or 6 years of working as a learning specialist, I wasn't married. I didn't have kids, so I was very young. I knew a lot of knowledge from
had all the answers.
From being in education for so long and working with kids and families. And so it wasn't that I was lacking experience, but I wasn't lacking perspective from a parenting perspective. And so what changed for me was, I had parents would come into my office with these problems and be like, well, it's obvious. You just do this and then it gets better.
Easy.
So
It's easy, Mr.
there was
Karen.
a lot of like
Sure.
seemingly simple solutions to problems. And then after having kids, you realize it's never that simple.
So
And so I think what my biggest like takeaway from that is you need, as a parent, need to know what you're good at and release some other stuff. Like I think you're not going to get, it's not about perfection. It's about progress. Like taking baby steps to like figure out what you need to do and seeking help. And a lot of times it's hard for parents to ask for help. It's admitting some faults or some, failure or something. I think there's this guilt that moms especially feel that is really hard and shameful to like recognize that there's a problem.
Yeah.
So I think just empathy for families and parents, and even though one solution works for one child, it doesn't work for another. So just creating relationship and open dialogue with families, like try this, see how it works, let me know, and working together with them, not just giving them, you do this and your problem will be solved.
Yeah,
It's not
no.
a simple solution.
That's fantastic advice. I mean, it looks like you gave, after being a parent, a little more grace for the parents as well. And I think there's a lot of advice and wisdom you have there for both as a parent asking for help, but also the new graduate who's got the double degree like you and knows everything that maybe, you need perspective a little bit here and that there's some experience and there's, so that's excellent advice.
Yeah. It's like scaffolding. We joke, I was talking to my dad about a lot of new graduates coming in. He's a lawyer. And so coming in and like, they're just been in school their entire career. And so they come in thinking, okay, where's the syllabus? How many pages does this need to be? What type, what font? Like they need concrete steps. And so I think a lot of new people entering the workforce or kids even, they need scaffolding. So like you're taking what you used to need of the syllabus laid out very succinctly for you to like, let's try to incorporate some critical thinking, problem solving skills, all of that.
Great. No, that's fantastic advice. And
Yeah, it's really good advice, especially every workplace.
Every workplace has
so
that.
what's coming in, when someone's coming new out of college. And by the way, I think you can hire some phenomenal people right out of college. I think we need to be careful of always looking for this experiential resume that may or may not be ideal. When you start looking on things.
Willingness to work hard.
Willingness to work hard. And that's where you want to start peeling back. That's in those interviews when you want to get to know them in the interview.
Right.
More than one. And you peel all of those layers back. I hired Garrett out of college.
Wow.
I was in a room of a panel interview. I think there was 7 of us representing 3 different businesses. And everyone's like, oh, he seems like a good kid, just young. And I'm like, I'll take him. And he's been one of the most phenomenal guys to work with.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I mean, we can go down so many different paths.
Sure.
I think there's so many more questions that we have, but we're only close to 50 minutes. So what we can do now is that, like we did before with the others, an invitation, like in the future, have you back on again. If there are people who have listened to this podcast or watched YouTube and have some comments and questions, we can look to get that back to you, and then you can answer this on air again. I mean, I just think it was a very important perspective, just knowing your background, being married to Ryan and raising, obviously a very articulate, intelligent young girl. And some people were wondering, what did you guys do to create that environment for someone who was, she was actually the one, it was Sophie's idea to come on the podcast. She wasn't begging. She was basically, I want to be on this podcast. You can have me on.
Demanding,
Right. So, but she did fantastic. I mean, how this really started is that we were just kind of playing with her, like rehearsing, just joking, but she had fantastic answers. And Ryan's like, we need to record this. And so this is how this whole series starts, because of Sophie. Yeah. So I think that's very interesting. Is there anything else you guys want to say? Or
No, I think that's really great, James. Anything that did come up that we want to unpack further, like just let us know, and we're going to dive deeper. Now, from this, you're going to hear some themes moving forward that will come out. We're going to talk about alignment. We're going to talk about knowing your people. What does that mean? We're going to talk about how these things apply at home and in the workplace and in life.
Yeah.
Life isn't that compartmentalized. So.
No, I mean it all. And now we're like hybrid models. We're working at home. We're at work, and then we've got kids, and then we've got stuff. And the beautiful thing is we're entering an era where it's being celebrated that, hey, someone has to go somewhere for their child. Yeah. And we need parents involved in their children's lives. Mm-hmm. That's what we need in America, what we need in the world.
Right. And not just about how do you get involved in a way that helps develop them, not versus where they feel shame. Right. Another topic anyway. So, Lauren, did you have anything else to say? Or?
No, thank you.
Well, yeah, well, appreciate having you on. I know you're super busy and I know things are going on, but we really appreciate the time. So thank you guys sharing your lives and sharing your knowledge. Okay. Until next time.